call. We'll get started in just a moment. I can see a lot of people are still getting on, so I'm going to give it one more minute. Okay, well, congratulations, we made it through 3 years. Not everybody thought we could do this. So NHRC is now 3 years old. Depends on how you look at it. It's either August 1st or August 7th. August 7th was when we officially got notified by, we cleared the hurdle with Tides Foundation or Tides Center. So I don't know how much you know about NHRC, but we're not a separate corporate entity. We're a project of Tides Center, and Tides Center is really a foundation created to help progressive social service and nonprofit organizations, and they work around the country. There's over 250 groups that are part of Tides Center, and there's also a large international component as well. And I mean, it's acts as our fiscal agent. They do all the payroll and accounting and things like that. We're part of their audit, and they're a 501c3, and we and when we lobby, you know, there's a certain portion you can do that's lobbying, and they have plenty of unused capacity, so we don't need to worry about doing too much. Though we're not close to that at this point, and it's been a very helpful relationship, and they were. It means that we didn't have to incur the costs of creating our own bylaws and corporate structure, and then maintain it and have all the legal infrastructure that you have to put underneath a corporation, which many of you do it day in and day out. So Tide Center has been a good ally of ours and sponsor. They're our fiscal agent. So so depending on what day you choose, but this week is our anniversary week. So thanks for sticking by us. A lot of you have, and you know, it's been pretty exciting. So we'll get a chance to talk about this. Jennifer Murphy from the advisory board is going to join us later in the call, I hope, and we'll talk maybe a little bit about highlights, and we'd be interested in what your highlights were and where you think we should be going in the upcoming year. But we'll talk about that in a little bit. What we're going to hit right now is the federal funding for housing counseling, and then want to talk to you a little bit about the leaders call in 2 weeks, because I think we all need to be doing some thinking about the kind of deeper issues that this raises. We've got an opportunity, we hope, with the CFPB about getting more escalations around mortgage complaints, and we could be at the cusp of something. We have to figure out the technology on how to do this. We've got, there was a meeting with intermediaries and multi-state organizations and the state housing finance agencies that HUD sponsored yesterday. Wanted to bring you up to date on some of the things they mentioned there, knowing that not everybody could be there at the meeting, just to keep you up to date on the kinds of things that HUD is thinking about and talking about. And we're going to plan a couple of surveys to help better improve NHRC, and love your participation on it. We'll have our wild happy birthday celebration, and I think we want to talk a little bit, and please do some thinking about what you thought the highlights were last year, but more importantly, what we should be working on in the upcoming year. And also, one of the things that we really have seen is that there are a few calls that we've done this year on the leaders call that we think of as blockbusters, and I'll talk about it in a little bit more detail, but a lot more participation happened on those calls, like the millennials call, and then the one on student debt. And clearly those rang a bell for lots and lots of people. Are there other things like that that will that cuts across everybody's lines, that are major issues for our programs that are really things that we could get our arms around in the context of the calls or maybe a special webinar. And we are, just to remind everybody, we'll be doing much more in-depth webinars with experts on student debt this fall, and a much deeper dive. And those calls will have the capacity to have all of your staff on there. So anybody you want to bring in on that, we'll do that, and we'll announce it through our channels, but also through the HUD channels, I'm sure. And then just a quick reminder that joining NHRC makes us stronger, and we've got well over 100 groups that are members now, and it's the gamut from the largest intermediaries to very small organizations of 1 and 2 and 4 people. And we've got room for all of you, and we really do need the support, but also appreciate the support. I think it's sort of a statement that we tell the outside world that there's real commitment from the housing counseling community. Okay, Matthew, let's move forward. So what's happening with federal funding these days in the dog days of August?
So there's very little by way of an update to anything kind of moving through Congress. I just put a kind of reminder on there that the very likely next step is when they come back in September that there'll be a short-term continuing resolution that'll fund the government maybe for a month, maybe for a couple months, and they'll go back to the negotiating table, see if they can strike a deal, and you know, after that, the two possible outcomes are some kind of grand bargain or just a series of continuing resolutions. The one thing I also wanted to mention, though, is we're going to be sending out either today or maybe next week a sign-on letter. As folks who've been on the call know, the NFMC was zeroed out in the Senate. It was funded at $42 million by the House, so we're going to circulate a sign-on letter. Hopefully, we'll have a huge number of organizations sign on, asking Congress to fund NFMC at the $42 million level that the House passed. So folks, please be on the lookout for that, and we hope everyone on the call will be able to sign on to that.
Yeah, and I think strategically what the idea is that we would use that in September when budget discussions kick up again, and when they're trying to decide whether it's going to be a CR or there's going to be some compromise. Though every indicator that, as Matthew said, every indicator is that it's likely that they won't be able to come to some terms by October 1. There'll be at least some temporary help. And a CR, just to remind people, it's based on last year's budget, so that would be a win for us because it would keep both the last year's housing counseling funding, which is, I think everybody's agreed on, is the same this year, but there's a proposed cut in the House from 50 to 42 million, and of course the Senate came up with 0 and in NFMC funding. We're making some progress on pushing back on that, and lots of good work happening in Maine right now, and our Rhode Island work really has paid off, and many groups in Ohio and ESOP in Ohio was very helpful in this, and CHAPA was very helpful in this as well. So we will continue doing the work that we've been doing to reach out to Republicans during this period of time, especially in the House and Senate, where we can start building more of a relationship and presence. I think this is making some progress here that's very important. So now on our next call, I think we passed out and mentioned on a previous call an Urban Institute study that really talked about the home ownership trends. And actually, let me just add one more thing I just mentioned that I just learned, that a couple weeks ago we posted about that the home ownership level in the United States had dropped to the same level it was in 1993. So this whole surge of home ownership that had grown up really from the Clinton administration and a lot of the work that housing counseling groups did to increase home ownership, and especially African American and Latino home ownership. There's been tremendous erosion there. We're back to almost the point where that whole push started. So I was in a meeting at HUD yesterday. We'll talk about it more a little bit later in the call, but Chris Herbert was there from the Center for the Joint Center for Housing Studies at Harvard, and he said that the latest housing report shows that the homeownership level has dropped to the level of 1968. That's pretty astonishing, and it's a pretty astonishing drop, but if it's correct, that's shown tremendous erosion. The Urban Institute did a study a few weeks ago, released it. It was basically about the homeownership trends with a little bit more detail to it. And if you looked at it closely, they were saying that Hispanics will represent 75% of the growth in the United States in new home ownership. And they predicted that African American households would continue to decline in their share of home ownership in the total market. So this is where there's a huge deficit between white and African American home ownership. I mean, 20 points kind of drop, very, very serious. And the idea is that while there'll be growth in the Hispanic markets, that African American will continue to decline. And there's more to be said about the whole study and how does it impact Asians, which they didn't do as good a job on. But what I think it really is a big signal for us about the whole question of the wealth gap in the United States and what are the future trends for the communities that we work in. And we are in a very special place, I think, where your programs are really on the front lines of where these decisions get made, and we have an opportunity to really affirmatively impact what are very worrisome trends in this country. And partly we have to figure out how to get our arms around it. Some of the thinking that we've been doing is that part of this is programmatic, so really having programs out there, your programs out there that are engaging with with home buyers from the Hispanic community, engaging with home buyers from the African American community, and really from all underserved communities. That's tremendously important. But we also need product that really responds well to the needs of each of these communities. And what one worries about is that the trend here is that you'll go towards the higher credit scores, you'll go towards the more burgeoning population, and this will kind of continue the same issues around the wealth gap that's been in the past. We've asked, and Jim, on the drop of a hat, said absolutely he wanted to join us. So Jim Carr, many of you may know, is the distinguished researcher. He was the head of research at Fannie Mae for years, was at NCRC for several years, did lots of very innovative work, did some very deep studies about community reinvestment lending, HMDA, what are the racial and ethnic patterns in lending, and thinks deeply about these questions. He is a senior fellow now at the Center for American Progress and also has his own shop that does work on this. He's going to join us for the call on the 20th, and you know, it's very interesting. I think he's a guy who's kind of in demand, and but literally I just dropped him a note and got a very quick reply that he would be very interested in joining us. So we're going to do a series of these conversations with thought leaders from around the country who are dealing with these issues. And some of them will be academics, though I'm also interested in if you've got some people who might be more practitioners who can help us think how we can be more affirmative in this area. We as a community, and want to be able to get our arms around what are very difficult problems that will really reflect wealth for communities of color for generations. I think we have lost a generation of wealth in the foreclosure crisis from predatory lending and from very aggressive investment policies that worked dramatically against communities of color especially, and against low and moderate income people. And this wealth gap issue is large, and while I know there's a narrative out there that says that home ownership may not be a good investment for poor people, but it sure looks to everything that I see and what some of these academics are saying that there really isn't a comparable wealth builder. And going to the stock market, it's also a risky proposition, but in fact much riskier. And the one thing about stock is you can't live in it. It's not a totally functional thing. And I think we have a lot at stake at trying to rebuild home ownership in America, and that's really kind of what one of our tasks may be in the next coming couple of years. So looking forward to that. Let's move on quickly. So the CFPB escalation line. So Matthew.
Yeah, so I think we'd mentioned this on the last call, but just wanted to go a little more in depth to let folks know about the escalation line. So previously, the CFPB had just had their complaint database. That's something that's it's basically there to collect data. They kind of look at a lot of data and use it to kind of analyze trends, try to spot problematic issues that are going on kind of in the big picture. But there'd been an ongoing conversation with CFPB about trying to do something that was actually a complaint for individual cases. So we worked with them. They've actually been very happy to work with us and try to work on some improvements. And they came up with this escalation line is what we've come up with to allow. It's designed for housing counselors as well as legal service folks to escalate cases where they're having issues with servicers. The CFPB, their concern is that they don't have the capacity to be fielding, even dozens or let alone hundreds of calls coming in, and they're very concerned about getting overwhelmed. So we work together again with them, and what we've come up with is we're gonna have a network of screeners who can look at the cases. Well, sorry, to go back for a second. So the first kind of thing they put in place to make sure they weren't overwhelmed is to really limit the cases that can be referred to the escalation line. And so you see on the screen, it's cases. It has to be a clear violation of the CFPB's servicing rules. It needs to be time sensitive, and it needs to be a significant thing. So, for example, if a client is in imminent foreclosure, there's a foreclosure that's scheduled to happen in the next week, and there's a clear violation of the regulations, that would absolutely be the kind of case that we would want to bring to the escalation line. But if it's that the client submitted an application and didn't get a response within 5 days, which is a violation of the regulations, but it's not such a significant thing. So that's not the sort of thing that we would bring to the escalation line. And so then the second kind of thing to make sure that they're not overwhelmed is that we're going to create a network of screeners. There's a few different ways that we're playing with. It may be set up geographically so that maybe we'll have, ideally, maybe one person for Northern California, one person for Southern California, one person for Washington and Oregon, something like that. Or we may do it by networks. I mean, there's a few different models that it could follow. But the important thing is that we really need folks to volunteer to make this work. We recognize that folks are busy and do not have time to take on a huge time commitment. That's why we're really hoping to find 15 or so volunteers we think would make it so that no one's being overwhelmed by cases. We've had some experience. It was launched already in New York, and Empire Justice and the Center for New York City Neighborhoods are working together on that. It's not something that's been really advertised a lot, but in the Ellie Pepper from Empire Justices handling upstate New York, and she had in the first, I think she had said it was 2 or 3 weeks, she had only had a couple of cases referred to her. So I think, you know, the volume, as the word gets out, the volume could go up, but I think, you know, folks, the expectation is that it would be probably just a few hours a month. You would, the way it would work is folks would have your contact info. When they wanted to escalate a case, they would send you the details. You would review those, see if it meets the 3 criteria we mentioned, and if it does, let them know, okay, yes, we're going to go ahead. It may be that you ask them to kind of clarify any questions or provide a little more detail, but you know, making sure that it's giving CFPB what they need to act on it, and then just screening out cases that do not meet the criteria. So we would love for folks on the call. We have had some folks volunteer. We had at least one person on the last call when we mentioned it. I think Bruce met some folks yesterday who were interested, but we definitely need some folks to get involved from the call. So we'll circulate an email with some more details, but if you are interested, please, you can let me know right now in the question or chat box, or the question box rather. You can send me an email, and we'll also mention this when we send out a follow-up email.
Good. So HUD holds an annual meeting. Typically had been initially just for the intermediaries. They've now added multiple state organizations, multi-state organizations, and the state housing finance agencies. And that meeting was yesterday, and so and I was there as well as representing NHRC, and we I thought I'd mention a few things that came up that people should be aware of. So one is that HUD is considering doing, well, it will be doing some revisions to the Housing Counseling Handbook, and it's to make it in conformity with the new rule, that the certification rule. And so they're opening the book anyways on this. This does create an opportunity where we think that things might be outdated or impractical in the handbook, that we could argue for revisions on other things as well. So so one thought is that if there's a lot of interest, and especially if people have some ideas about things that might significantly improve the housing counseling work, that we maybe revive the HUD task force and have them do some work on this, but really only if there's lots of ideas and people who want to spend time on this. A couple things that have been suggested. One is that rental counseling is not well addressed. The handbook still assumes largely that you're doing home ownership counseling. The example that Jane Wong used when she raised that concern is that when somebody comes to a housing counseling agency and they're a renter who wants to get the landlord to do the repairs they're required to do, the counseling agency has to do a budget plan. But in fact, you know, that's kind of unrelated to what the particular need was, and kind of misses the point in terms of what the counseling was that needs to be delivered. And so trying to fine-tune what that is. A second area that Sarah actually raised was that the HECM counseling does not require an action plan, and why would that be? But there may be other things, you know, that it'd be worth your taking a few minutes, look at the handbook, see if there are things that you think, oh my goodness, we really do need to change this. And if so, please shoot us an email. We'll be interested in. We can always pull together a group of people if we've got some good substantial issues. The plan for the HUD NOFA was to have it, they were shooting to have it in November come out. Now, there was somebody in the Q&A who said November's a bad month because of all the other reporting requirements that come because of the end of the quarter kinds of issues. Could they do it in December instead? So they were talking about they would take a look at it, but that's sort of the time range in which they're working on. On HUD certification, they were still projecting October as the goal, but said they had lots of legal issues to work out, and they're not completely in control of it. They want to get it out as soon as possible. Really did appreciate all the work that groups had been doing to be prepared for the certification, and were very happy about the response that they were getting on the website that they put up about certification. And as soon as the rule is out, they'll also put out sample tests and things. So in terms of the number of households served, and when Sarah was on our call a few months ago, some of these issues came up as well. She pointed out that in 2010, 3 million people were counseled by housing counseling agencies. So this is the left-hand column, the all activities, not the specific to HUD activities. And in 2014, it was 1.3 million. So down substantially. Now the funding is down substantially as well, so not astonishing, but they were very interested in trying to get those numbers back up at least to 1.5 million, and were interested in talking with groups. One of the sets of issues that they raised was that when they do reviews, they are seeing some overcounting. So somebody who comes in as an intake but never has a budget done, their financials aren't collected, those people being included as counseling, well, that's not correct. They weren't counseled. But on the other hand, she said that they did see a lot of undercounting. So programs where there were people who were where they were only counting the people that were in the HUD contract, and then people doing other streams were not included. And even though the same work was being done on them, those kinds of things. So they are interested in sort of a concerted effort to make sure that both the numbers are accurate and that we're not losing clients that we would normally be able to take credit for. They do look at they really are emphasizing the all activities on the idea that HUD money leverages those activities, and that they think that presents a better picture to the public and to Congress. And I have to say I agree with that. I think that's a pretty savvy way of thinking about all this. The other thing was something that Sarah had dived into when she was on the call, and that is on outcomes. And the example they used was in last year, of all the people that got counseling, only 23% had an outcome that said they developed the household budget. Well, that's a requirement that HUD has. So presumably, it's not that 77% of the people didn't get a budget. It's just simply that other outcomes might have been checked, but that box had not been checked. Now, this last quarter, the numbers are a little bit better. So 28% developed a budget, but it does seem like we're still missing a gap. So definitely worth thinking about that. HUD did pay a lot of attention to this issue at the meeting, and these will probably show up in site reviews and hopefully in other ways as well. I think the idea is that if you've got an outcome, that the outcome doesn't necessarily need to be just purchased a house. They also developed a budget. There could be other things. And there was a point where the 9902s could only do one outcome, and that has all changed now. So retraining our staffs around this is very important. The last thing that I just sort of mentioned as an interesting thing was complaints. She did a special thank you about the effort we made to get complaints, get a complaint system in place if you have a problem with your point of contact, and and that's Phyllis Ford. So you can do the complaint anonymously, and you will be. But they feel very good about that it really created opportunities for retraining people.
So just to go back for 1 second, could you just, for the statistics that you had given on the number of clients. Could you just recap the numbers and what years they were from?
Oh, yeah, sure. So let's see. For households served in 2010, 3 million people were counseled. And then in 2014, it was 1.3 million. So, oh. Agency, and that there were, and so if you're talking about 2,300 organizations out there, that seems like a pretty good number to get only 30 complaints. And she said that very few of them were really, I mean, they're all being investigated, but very few of them were really damaging. Most of them were more about communication issues, and that might have included the complaints that we did on our side to about points of contact. But she was very encouraging about complaining, because as some of you we have told stories about this before, that this is a way that they get feedback, and it's seen as a positive, but also that it's not really a large problem out there. They have very few investigations going on. There are a few that are in place, and very few of them most of them represent mistakes and not willful problems. So it was kind of a nice recognition of the work that we do. So that was all on the plus side. Now, we are also going to, oh, wait a minute, I left out something here. So, oh yes, so we got it here. So on the upcoming surveys. So we are trying to figure out how to improve ourselves. It's all about self-improvement. We're 3 years old. We want to have a better fourth year. And so there are a few things that we're going to ask you about. There are going to be 2 separate surveys. The first 2 bullet points will be in the first survey. And so we're going to just ask about what people are interested in terms of doing the national meeting. And we probably have an opportunity to do it in December. There will not be an NFMC meeting that NeighborWorks does. We could do it at their time, and that does mean we get their facilities, I think. We'll have to ask. But they've been very supportive in the past. We could do it in another location, though the cost for us rises pretty dramatically, pretty quickly. So interest about whether people are willing to travel to DC. The advantage, again, to DC is that a number of the decision makers are there, and with this amount of time ahead of time, we could probably go for some big names. And you know, we're on people's radars. We are getting a lot of recognition, so this could be pretty interesting. But we really need to figure out if this is what people want, and we'll probably ask something a little bit about the format as well. The other thing in that survey is we're interested in NHRC projects that we should be working on. And you know, it's very interesting when you look at what people responded to well. We seem to be kind of at a place now where we're getting 70 to about 120, 130 people on any call, no matter what. And you know, again, managers are busy. This is actually a very, very good turnout. But you know, when we did the millennials call, we had over 200. We had 250 for Sarah Jarek, and for the student debt one, which we've learned a lot about, we had 350 people. So more than doubled really tripled our usual traffic. And so partly we're interested in what else people are interested in, or if they want more of the same, which is not a problem. But those kind of blockbusters tell us something, and we want to keep our ears close to the ground about what you would find that's useful. What surfaced in the early conversations was bankruptcy training, and we'll be working on that in the upcoming year, but interested if there are other ideas. So one thing would be at the leaders call, and the second one if there are other kinds of programs that we should be aware of that you're thinking about. And do you like the Innovations in Housing Counseling series, or we're going to launch this wealth gap conversation? I mean, just let us know what works, and please tell us what doesn't work. You don't always get that, and we need that, so that's very helpful. There will be a separate survey because we are going to look again at getting a new discount on credit reports. And so when we first started, a little over 3 years ago, we did a survey that was very helpful and in negotiating a deal. That deal is over now, and we're going to go out into the marketplace again. We have some reason to think that we may have a much larger volume this time around, and so what we're going to ask is, who's your provider? Is it HCO? Do you pull through HCO, through Counselor Max, or on your own directly, or is there another provider? What are you paying? And who's the service that you use? And this all is really helpful to identify who we should approach about getting a discount, and what the pricing in the marketplace looks like. Obviously, we're trying to get the lowest price possible, but I do think that it's a lot of work to transfer to a different credit reporting agency. So we're cognizant of that, and that the value should be really worth it. But we know that agencies on the last discount saved thousands and thousands of dollars in a year. So most saved hundreds at least, but a number of the bigger players saved in the thousands, and that was great to hear. So we want to do more of that. So, and if you've got a perfect idea of what other discounts we should be trying to get at that are key to the industry, let us know. Okay. Judy didn't want to come on. All right, so guess what? It's happy birthday time, and Jennifer Murphy is going to join us. And is Jennifer there?
I am here.
All right.
Hello.
Hey, Jennifer. Good. Well, so Jennifer is, all of you, I'm sure many of you know Jennifer because she's been a long time housing advocate and deeply involved with New Jersey Citizen Action in the early days, with Center for New York City Neighborhoods, with New Jersey Community Capital, but with many other projects, and been incredibly helpful to starting NHRC and in being an advisory board member and being very generous with her thoughts and time. So it's just us right now, Jennifer, and the 70 or 80 people who are out there on the phone with their celebratory happy birthday hats on and noisemakers.
Well, I got my champagne.
Oh, good. Start early. Sounds good. Sounds good. You know, we have really covered a lot of ground, and I'm pretty thrilled. I do have to share with all of you that, you know, not everybody thought this was going to work, and we really have kind of rocked the Casbah on some of these things. We are pretty widely recognized, and as housing counseling, as being a really vital tool in the work that's getting done. And I hope everybody feels thrilled and proud that we're getting recognition long overdue. And you know, I mean, I do go to meetings and people talk about unsung heroes, and they're talking about you guys. That's really, really good stuff. And while I feel like there's huge things we have in front of us, I do feel like we ought to be doing some patting of the backs.
Well, definitely,
So,
because
yeah.
I think when we first started talking about the concept of a membership organization, one of the issues that I know was forefront with me was that a lot of people had no idea what a housing counselor was, why you would go to a housing counselor. And those of us that have been, you know, absorbed in housing counseling for, you know, any period of time, especially as long as you and I have been, we're so in the weeds with it it's such a daily fact of life that it's kind of a smack in the face when people don't know what you are and what you're doing. And I think that, one of the big steps that we've taken by standing together is defining who we are and giving a voice to an industry that does really, really incredible work, but we've tended to toil separately out there in their communities. And by being able to bring, the mountain to Muhammad in some ways, that everyone can have a voice with HUD. Everyone's opinion counts, and I think that in 3 years you've come so far from a concept that I think we started talking about on the train on the train back from DC one day.
It's absolutely true. That's right. That's right.
So you guys, you and Matthew have done absolutely fabulous work. I'm in awe. Those that know me know that I'm not shy about giving my opinions. So, and I think that when somebody does fabulous work, you really have to stop and stand back and say, if these people have done fabulous work and brought us all together. But I do think that it's important that if you haven't joined NHRC yet, that you do join NHRC. And not just because, yes, we need funding to be able to do things. The cost of joining NHRC is nominal. The ability to stand up and say we're a membership organization with, how many members do we have now, 105?
Yep.
Right? 105 members is powerful. To be able to say we have 250 members will be twice as powerful. So I ask that everybody think about that. It doesn't cost a lot. And the more members we have, the stronger we are and the more voice we have. Because then people say, this is an organization that is in my community. This is an organization that has my people's thoughts, my people's needs behind them. And I need to pay attention to this organization. So that's my my advertisement for joining NHRC today.
Really sounds good to me. An interesting thing is that when I go to meetings now, I don't have to explain what NHRC is in DC. I mean, we are kind of well known in the policy circles, and you do hear now that when people are talking about issues, oh yes, well, NHRC commented on this, and in Congress that they got the NHRC letter. I mean, that's actually pretty interesting that we've been able to elevate quickly. I think another thing that's very valuable that it really speaks to the depth of the Housing Counseling Network is that we have been able to go to many pretty far-flung districts. This is Matthew's work, that are Republican districts, that are essentially rural districts, rural or suburban districts, and pull together what housing counseling agencies there are and get meetings with key Republicans, and they've and now increasingly there are relationships that already exist that we can build on, and we are completely elevating the idea and image of housing counseling. And to be honest, in the Republican world, where government is not seen as a particularly good solution among a large faction of the Republicans, certainly some Republicans are still moderate Republicans and completely get it, but there's a much more conservative streak of folks that don't see it, but definitely understand constituent service, definitely understand working with people to help them become homeowners, in some cases to keep their houses. That kind of work we're able to do because to those conversations because you're out there in the field doing this work, and we are we got to Lutkemeyer up in northeast Missouri, and Valladolid in outside of Fresno. I mean, both of those were key meetings, key, very powerful Republicans, and it's the local agencies that were on the scene that made it happen, brought in clients, and really added authenticity. And We're now working on Diaz-Balart. This is all Matthew's work. I'm just don't want anybody to kid me. This is what that's what he puts his time into, is really building these networks. And some of you may get calls from him about, we've got to reach a certain person, and can you help us either by doing calls or setting up a meeting, and let's get a field meeting. But all that stuff has been, we've really been able to build inroads of places we have not been before.
And that local touch is crucial to you, being able to, it's one thing to call from be a national organization, but to have somebody that will actually vote for you, call you, or can vote for you, is very powerful in politics.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I mean the Charlie Dent relationship, who is a moderate Republican and does have a different view of all these things, but who gets along with everybody. This is a relationship that we're going to really build on in the next year. That really had to do with local groups, with the Lehigh Community Action Council and the local NeighborWorks group there. I mean, we're going to do more of that this upcoming year, and I hope we can raise enough money that we'll be able to have somebody who acts as an organizer out in the field and works more directly with groups. I should also, just while we're thinking about this and talking about the kind of building out, one of the areas that we've been working with a little bit and want to do more in the upcoming year is to build more kind of regional or statewide collaboratives where it doesn't exist currently, or where it exists but it isn't as strong as it might be. We've seen as examples in New York and Illinois, Maryland, though I know they're going through a little bit of a bump right now, and there are others out there that they have the capacity to do training. In New York, they have relationships with the state AG's office that's delivered a lot of money to local groups. They have a presence in the legislature. They work with the local legal services, Empire Justice Center in New York's case. That kind of powerful network allows counseling agencies to be more successful and to emphasize that, to increase their work and their visibility. And to the extent that we can develop more of this, we're going to approach NeighborWorks. They've been instrumental in some of these. Try to figure out if there's more ways we can encourage that in local areas. And when there's interest, you should let us know. And actually, if you have an existing network, even if it's struggling, let us know. I am trying to thread these all together. And a couple years ago, we got HUD to do a stakeholder meeting specifically for networks, and we'll try to do other things to strengthen that.
It can be difficult because a lot of them are ad hoc, and everybody works already so much that a lot of it is volunteering. But one thing about the New York Coalition that I know because I was a member of it, when Albany, which is the state capital, was funding housing counseling and was going to pull back, was for funding foreclosure counseling, they were going to pull back. We were able to mobilize really quickly because we were all in touch with each other. So we were able to mobilize really quickly, get everybody on the train to Albany, and go to the State House and get the funding reinstated. And that was crucial, was that we didn't have to build the boat in the middle of the ocean. It was already there.
Good phrase. Yeah. So, Jennifer, what highlight would you single out from the past year?
Well, there's so many, but I really like this bipartisan support. I myself have not had spent. I called it your Hug an Elephant campaign.
That's a good one.
And I found it quite refreshing to get the support, to see that housing shouldn't be a partisan issue. Everyone should have safe, affordable housing. And I think that that's something that everyone can agree on. And I really think that you guys have made great inroads and made great friends, because when you can cross the aisle, especially in today's atmosphere, that's huge. So I really applaud that, and I know it was a lot of work. And I applaud everybody that came out, too, and took the time, because it's not always easy to leave your office and get to Washington and go out and see people. And it's really meant a lot, I think. And you're building, you're building a foundation for the future. And we all know how hard funding is. I think, having been an executive director of a housing counseling agency, I don't think there was anything more agita-inducing than the funding. And being able to keep some type of stability is just incredibly important. So that's really, I've been very impressed with that.
For me, I mean, it was a very sweet moment when we had the meeting with Julian Castro. He'd only been in office a few weeks. We first heard they weren't doing public meetings at all, and we were absolutely one of the first. And when he came in, it was a bit of a conversation. We went through. I thought we had a pretty good list of issues we wanted to talk about. Wanted them to be alerted about the settlements and the role that HUD had played in the settlements. We wanted them to really help build the reputation of housing counseling and get the word out by visiting housing counseling agencies and doing things that promoted the opportunities. We wanted them to be very clear about the funding for both HUD and NFMC, and a real shot at technology support. And the secretary has gone to at least 3 agencies that I know about, and got the president to come to one of them. That's not bad.
Wow.
Yeah. So in Arizona, and we had we've had a very good dialogue with his office. And I mean, there was interest in technology. I have to say we have not capitalized on that in a way I would like, and we have to figure out how to get that back on track. They heard us loud and clear on the funding, and I think have defended our funding in difficult budget years. The first step is always to get the president's budget, and that's what they have done. I think it was, we got very good reviews from the HUD staffers who said that this was a very helpful meeting. And it was on top of 5 hours that we did with the HUD task force and Sarah Jarik and her leadership team, which they still talk about today as being kind of one of their instrumental meetings in terms of thinking about their policy for this past year. So, that was a high point for me.
Well, the whole relationship that you have with HUD is, this dialogue that's open and
Absolutely.
And I've never seen anything like this. I've been involved in housing counseling since 1994. HUD was like Darth Vader. this dark force that told us what to do, and it didn't always make sense. Now we can have conversations, and I do think a lot of that too is that Sarah Jarik ran NHS of New York City and knows that some things were not making sense. But it's still this relationship that we have is just absolutely incredible. And you saw that with Julian Castro. He was open and comfortable with us. It was a very comfortable meeting. Very and he was very impressive.
Yeah, no, I think, and one of the things that we've really worked hard on this past, really 2 years, has been to really elevate housing counseling with each of the agencies. And we now have this White House task force, which brings together all the agencies, and Mike Stegman now, used to be Seth Wheeler, about moving forward on housing counseling issues and getting a more uniform strategy. So, and this leads us to the next question or issue, which is what we should be working on. And I have to say that one issue that is going to be central to our work is to really get the federal government to more deeply commit to the idea of requiring HUD-approved housing counseling agencies to be delivering housing counseling and nobody else. And where the rubber
Absolutely.
really hits the road on this is with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. And we continue to have huge problems that if you look at housing counseling being delivered by Fannie and through Fannie and Freddie programs, I'm willing to bet the majority of it is through these mortgage insurers, and it's contracted work that's done by it just has nothing. It will not look like anything what our housing counseling agencies are delivering in terms of depth, but especially in terms of objectivity. Essentially, this is work to get people to closing. It's not work to help people figure out their finances. And we have a tall challenge here, but it's pretty critical to our work.
Well, definitely. And I am deeply, I guess, upset by the loss of home ownership over the past 10 years. The foreclosure crisis, not only a lot of people who were homeowners are no longer homeowners, but a lot of people who would have been homeowners are not becoming homeowners. And when you said that we had reached the lowest homeownership rate since 1993, I said I started in 1994. I felt like my whole life's work evaporated for a second there. And I do think we need to think about how to turn this around and how to make home ownership achievable for working class people. It's still the biggest wealth building tool. And we are now in a good housing buyer's market where we're starting to stabilize, and we will be stabilizing more. So I think we need to start looking at home ownership counseling again, and specifically home ownership counseling for people who didn't do it right the first time, and preventing fraud.
Yeah, I think there's several groups of people. I think there are people who are coming fresh into the market who have good credit and maybe need to work on their income sources or things like that, and so they're the sort of the easiest population. I think that the people that fit into what you call well, people that were damaged in the recession, and the question is, can we help them recover in a way that allows them to become homeowners again? That because you got a bad loan, because you lost your job, does that mean you can't be a homeowner ever again? And we don't think so. And are there vehicles, FHA back to work, or maybe some kind of workaround with Fannie product or portfolio products? It's worth thinking about that. The third category are people who are discouraged borrowers who maybe have the impression that you need a more down payment than you do, that you need to have, I do need, unfortunately, to have pretty strong credit right now. But strong credit means 680, and there may be some idea people don't know what their scores are and thinking that what you need is 800. There's also this world where, I mean, Ed Golding said this at a recent meeting, that the FHA commissioner, so 680 is the cutoff. If you look at the numbers for 660, they perform just as well as 680. Why did 680 be the cutoff and not 660? And that's a really interesting point, that if it isn't significantly statistically accurate, why is that? I mean, I have to say that we had a lot of success for people that were kind of in that 540 to 640 credit score range who had excellent explanations. So it's not the credit score that made the difference. It was that we could figure out that they, in fact, did well with managing credit, but these incidents happened. They're in a situation where that won't happen again, and we can move forward. And I mean, it's very hard. I'd be interested to hear in the field if there are people who can get those kind of deals done today. My impression is it's not, but that's a huge gap right now, and one that I see will continue out there, and especially because people were hurt in the recession and ended up with damaged credit scores. Getting back on their feet will be difficult, and as we all know, the worst predatory lending was in African American and Hispanic communities. worst damage from the foreclosure crisis happened there. The worst declines in property values happened there as well. And interestingly enough, if you look at where the recovery is, or frustratingly enough, if you look at where the recovery is, it's much less so in majority-minority neighborhoods than it is in majority-white neighborhoods. So we're going to start trying to get our arms around some of this, and it's a dialogue that it's a conversation that I hope many of the people listening on the phone will participate in. We're going to need to figure out solutions, and some of these solutions are going to need to be geared towards ramping up our programs to really help people get back on their feet financially. Some of it is we can't solve the problem on our own about overly restrictive underwriting standards and credit overlays. We're going to need to deal with lenders directly on that. I think there's good thinking about that, and I'm hopeful that NCLR has been doing some real thinking that may create some opportunities for all of us. We'll want to participate in those. We're trying to engage a little bit with some of the lenders to try to get back to products that are more flexible and more responsive to the marketplaces that we work in.
Definitely putting our voices together with others is crucial. Just what you mentioned about the difference between 660 and 680. If there's no statistics to hold it up, then maybe we should be arguing to lower it to 660.
Yeah, and I really worry that we're just missing a large number of people because the work that we had around 620 and below is very low. I mean, FHA does goes down as low as 580, but in a world where letters of explanation worked, we were able to go deeper in the past. I worry about just. I mean, here's part of the problem is that we have lost all these homeowners who are African American and Latino. And frankly, most people, when they buy their first house, do it with help from the family. And if you've taken out a major source of wealth in those communities, that not only rubs them, but their children's ability to buy is also damaged as well.
Well, and it goes to the whole stability of the community, too.
Right.
You know, even that there's studies that say that children that live in homes that are owned by their parents do better in school. You know,
right, and health.
Don't.
Yeah, same thing with health. That kids are healthier, and the kids who were in houses that were foreclosed on show dramatic drops in health and in school.
And the stress that the family underwent during that time period, you know, leads to all kinds of other issues too.
Right.
As the housing counselors know, because the stress that they've been under dealing with the foreclosure crisis has been very
absolutely
difficult too.
Well, so we've got a lot of work to do. We're going to send out these surveys. Think about what kind of blockbuster calls we might do in the future. Please tell us about ideas you've got about issues. We're going to move on the call. Thank you so much for all your good work, Jennifer. I want to do one more plug on joining NHRC. And actually, just a quick alert, too, that I didn't mention, but in the HUD meeting, Leah Coldham from HPN brought up this idea about how to get the word out about counseling. And, you know, we've had some conversations about marketing and how to do this well. This was very interesting, and we'll look into this and help spread the word. But Google has something called AdWords and ad grants. So AdWords are essentially advertising through Google, and you then you're basically buying advertising using certain keywords that would promote responses, and then the ad grant is for nonprofit organizations, and you get up to $10,000 a month in free advertising it's not like it's like $10,000 in a pot. It's essentially you get subsidized up to $2 per word, and they're trigger words in doing things with Google. And so the idea might be that you either spend a little bit more and get $4 words, which have broader coverage, or maybe you do it for free and try to target and narrow down what the wording is to a more targeted area to promote the program. But the idea would be that there'll be some internet advertising that we can do, that you can do through Google, and that if we do it a lot, that this becomes a more routine thing that people see about availability of housing counseling in different marketplaces. And reportedly, most people who are trying to buy a house spend a fair amount of time on the computer looking at listings, looking at information, and we're trying to pick up on that. So another area that we'll join with others to try to promote. Think about joining NHRC. Go to the website. There's the membership upper right-hand corner. You can click to the membership form. Or I guess it's under membership. So click membership, and you'll get to our membership form. Love to have your support there.